I'd like you to join me in a contemplation exploring the concept of oneness. To do this, I'd like you to imagine certain scenes that I'm going to describe to you. Scenes that investigate the whole interconnectivity of things. The first scene that I'd like you to start to picture in your mind's eye is that of the sea. Imagine before you a vast ocean. And let's think about that sea for a moment. So the sea is the word we give for that expanse of water. But we have got words for other aspects of that water. So we have the idea of currents in the sea, so that would be a movement in the sea. We have the idea of a wave. And it's that concept I'd like you to contemplate for a moment. A wave is sea, and when it forms, it becomes a wave, but it's still part of the sea. And then when it comes splashing down, it's no longer a wave, but it's still sea. So a wave is a separate part of a whole that it's never removed from. And indeed, if we artificially remove that, it wouldn't be a wave and it wouldn't be the sea. So the idea of a separate thing that is part of a bigger picture is easy for us to picture and understand. I'd like you to move your attention now to a different scene to imagine. Imagine a blood cell going around your body. And I want you to imagine this blood cell is special in the sense that it's become self-aware. So let's really use our imagination. The blood cell knows it's alive. It's got its own nervous system to some degree. It takes in nutrition. It processes that. It eliminates waste. In a sense, every cell of our body is indeed a being in its own respect. Single-celled organisms are as alive as we are. In fact, we're like a team of single-celled organisms that have got together and are specializing in different areas. But this one is aware that it's alive. Now that cell would be understandably in disbelief if it was to be told it was part of a bigger picture. Going around its daily business, it's quite clear it's got its own physical borderlines. It is a cell. Outside those borderlines, the things it can influence, but it can't control directly. It's got its own life. It knows it was born out of other cells. It knows it's going to die like other cells do. It would be a very confusing and unrealistic idea to say to that cell, you're actually part of a great being which has got a higher consciousness. Take your awareness and amplify that by more than you could even imagine, and you're part of that. That would seem like a very far out and unrealistic idea to the cell. And maybe with its limited abilities, it couldn't even picture that. If it was lucky enough to be able to grasp this, maybe it could sense something, sense some of the patterns in the signals of the body and could see a kind of underlying pattern in what was going on. If it did sense that, it would have to let go of its idea of being a cell in order to be able to associate with the big picture. And that would be a very interesting experience, because if that happened, if its awareness expanded to the point where it integrated with the whole of you, it would know that it was never born. It was a cell. It became produced, part of the big picture. And when it became fully aware of who and what it really was, it would never die. Because when the cell was to come to the end of its life and be reprocessed, it may be even that when it's associated with the big picture, it didn't even notice. That would be a very interesting shift in perspective. Now let's imagine another scene. Let's imagine a scene in nature. Let's imagine there's an island, and on this island there are apple trees. It's a very big island. The apple trees, they grow from the tree, photosynthesizing, and it's taking nutrition through its roots, and it grows these apples for the birds to eat them, and the birds fly away having eaten them, and they deposit the seeds, and that's how new apple trees are spread. But on the island, there's nothing else that eats apple trees but the birds, and the birds don't eat anything but the apples from the trees. So, if one dies, the other one does. And they're completely interconnected. Under this circumstance, we could kind of start to see that they're more close than we think. Maybe the bird is a movable part of the apple tree. It's part of its reproductive system. Maybe the apple tree is a way that the bird gets nutrition from the sun. I mean, they're so interconnected, and you can make arguments against them. You can say it's very different, or that the bird can't directly control the tree, but you can make all the arguments for the cell in the body. So now let's move our contemplation to a traditional spiritual ideal. Let's imagine this idea of becoming at one with the universe, breaking the cycle of death and rebirth. In so many different traditions, this is put forward as a thing that needs to happen. So we, by some special technique or some process, we're going to change. We're going to stop being limited, and we're going to expand. We're going to become something. If we look at the previous scenes, it would be a very strange thing to start training a wave to be at one with the sea, wouldn't it? Very confused action, that would, wouldn't it? The cell doesn't need to do any work to be part of our body. It came from the body, it's part of it. Why would we need to make it struggle? What would struggle do? In fact, if it is struggling, surely that's enforcing this idea of separateness. Indeed, surely the whole idea that there's something to escape or become is contrary to this whole idea of oneness. So, perhaps, like the bird, it's possible to not realize how interconnected you are. It doesn't know how reliant it is or indeed how at one it is with the apple, and indeed the tree, and the sun, and the soil. But perhaps it's just as connected as the wave is to the sea or the cells in the body. Could we imagine, could we visualize as our final contemplation that we are? That the border lines between us are not as distinct as they appear? As I talk to you now, my thoughts become words, and they become thoughts in your mind's eye. Whose thoughts are they? Perhaps if we can contemplate this, we could realize that the process of death and rebirth can't be escaped because it's not real anyway. There is nothing to do that would make us become at one with anything. We're already there. So all we need is a perspective shift, an expanding of our understanding of the sense of self. The immortality, the freedom is there. But like the cell, would have to let go of the sense of self associated with being a cell. We would have to let go of the idea of ourself in order to become fully aware of what we really are. Perhaps when thinking about letting go of our ego, we should not be thinking in terms of being humble or letting go of any form of pride, but we should think in terms of expanding our sense of self to a more realistic sense of self and letting go of any petty, small sense of who we could be. Indeed, could we imagine that maybe this whole process could involve just shifting our perspective through letting go? That concludes our contemplation.